Today I would like to talk to you on the subject, what is a leader? Now I do leadership conferences all over the country. And usually in leadership conferences we allow a time for question and answers where people can raise their hand and say, hey John, I want to ask you a question about what you said in the area of leadership. Interestingly enough, the number one question that I'm asked when I do a leadership conference is people will raise their hand and they'll say, John, how can I find a leader? How can I find somebody to help me in my business? How can I find somebody in my organization that has leadership potential? They're always looking for leaders. And so my desire in this lesson today is to give you a picture of what a leader looks like. So by the end of the lesson, you kind of have an understanding of when you're looking for a leader or when you're trying to be a leader yourself. This is a picture, first of all, for you to apply to yourself as a person that wants to be a leader, but it's also a picture that you apply to others when you're looking around trying to find leaders. So let's get going because we've got a lot of stuff to cover, and I just really want to grab hold of the material and apply it to your life. You see, when I see a leader, I think of the word, first of all, leadership. Because leaders lead. That's exactly what they do. So when somebody says, John, what does a leader look like? I ask them to look around and see who's leading others. It's kind of like watch the people and see who the people are influenced by or drawn to. That's how you begin to pick out a leader. Now, let me share with you 5 myths about leadership. Number 1, I hear this often. People say leaders are born, not made. Now, you've heard that, haven't you? In fact, let me just take a time out while you're writing your notes. I bet everyone in this room, how many of you raise your hand and say, John, I've heard the saying, that leaders are born. How many of you heard that before? Okay, it's just a very common myth. In fact, when people ask me, many times they'll say, John, in a conference, again, in a question and answer period, they'll say, John, are leaders born? And whenever they ask me the question, are leaders born, I always give them the same answer. Of course they are. Now, when they're asking, are leaders born, what they're really asking is, are there some people that when they're born, they've got it? And there are other people that when they're born, they don't got it, I guess, huh? And I guess if you got it, you lead, and if you don't got it, you just kind of look for a line somewhere, and you get in line, and you just kind of march up 2, 3, 4 throughout life. Now, here's the good news. There are people that obviously are born with a leadership leaning, just like there are people that are born with a musical leaning and kind of a giftedness in that area. So there are people that are born that have a leaning towards the ability to lead, maybe more than others. But what I want you to understand today is that you can learn how to lead. Now this is huge. You can learn how to lead. Because we're talking about how to develop yourself as a leader. If you couldn't learn how to lead, why would you be here? Why would I be here? If really you couldn't learn leadership, we'd all go home. When I just say, okay, gang, it's been great to meet you. It's been wonderful. Now go home. There's no need for you to be here or me to be here unless it is a fact that you and I can learn to lead. So a huge myth that I think causes many people never to study leadership is the fact that they think that because they, quote, weren't born a leader, they're never going to learn how to lead. The second myth about leadership is this one, that leadership is a rare skill. Sometimes we look at leaders and we try almost to mysticize it until we say, well, it's just a rare skill and very few people have. You know what I believe about leadership? I believe that it is rare, but not because it's necessarily a rare skill. I believe it is rarely taught. I believe that most people do not lead because they've never been taught how to lead. And I can give you a classic example in my own life. I have 3 college and graduate degrees. So I've spent a lot of time in college. It didn't do a lot of good, but I've spent a lot of time there. In all of my years of college and graduate school, I've never had a leadership course ever. I've never gone to a classroom that was called leadership. I've never before had anybody sit down and try to tell me how to lead. And in my work, which has been always in the people business, which was basically always leading people, you would think that in the educational process, we would be taught how to lead. Now, here's all I want you to understand. The reason there are such few leaders is not because there needs to be such a few leaders. It's because Leadership is not often taught. That's why I have made, in the Enjoy Life group, has made a commitment to train and develop leaders, because here's what we find. The moment we begin to teach you the things we're teaching today, people begin to learn leadership, they begin to feel comfortable with leadership, they begin to have a picture of leadership, and they begin to grow as a leader. Myth number 3. Leadership exists only at the top of an organization. I hear that often. They'll say things like, well, the reason I don't go to a leadership conference is because I'm not the president of something, or I'm not the principal of the school, and I'm not at the top. And many people think that leadership is at the top. If you're not at the top, then, quote, leadership doesn't pertain to you. Now, here's what I want you to understand. Leadership is not position. Leadership is influence. How we influence people determines how we lead. And every one of us have a certain degree of influence. So here's what I want you to know. You can lead an organization from the middle of the pack if you have influence. In fact, I've often said you don't even have to be at the top of the organization if you just know how to influence the influencer. All of a sudden, you can begin to lead them. So leadership is not something that's just for the few people at the kind of the top of the heap organizationally, and all the rest of the people are just going to follow. No. Leadership should be learned by everyone, and you can lead from the middle of the pack. It's not just positional, it's influence. Myth number 4. The 4th myth is that all leaders are charismatic in personality. We kind of have this idea that leaders just have this charisma about them, and that people just kind of want to follow them, kind of like the Pied Piper. Now, we all know charismatic leaders, and it's wonderful to have them. In fact, with a charismatic type of a leader, you enjoy following him or her. But here, let me explain to you that although charisma is important, charisma doesn't make you a leader. There are people that have charisma that are not good leaders. There are people who lack charisma that are good leaders. In fact, I wrote a book several years ago called Be a People Person. And in that book, I talk in chapter 2 about how to draw people to yourself. Basically, I talk about charisma. I talk about how to obtain charisma. See, charisma is not something that you're born with. Sometimes we think charisma is like a personality. It's not that. Charisma is a mindset. People that are charismatic think differently than people that lack charisma. Let me explain. For example, if I'm coming into this room right here, let me explain the difference between a person that has charisma and a person that does not have charisma. If I have charisma and I walk into this room, and what's your name? Denny. If I walk into this room and I'm a person that has charisma, and I walk into it, and here's what happens. If I have charisma, I go into the room and I put Denny's agenda ahead of my own. So I talk about the things that Denny's interested in. I ask him questions. I find out his interests. In other words, people that have charisma are other-focused. Does that make sense? In other words, they talk about the things that interest you. People who lack charisma are self-focused. And that's the main difference. You see, if I lack charisma, what happens? I walk into a room like this, and the first thing I think is, boy, I just hope somebody talks to me. Man, I hope the people are friendly, and they don't look real friendly to me. I just, if somebody would just come up and make me feel a little bit at home. See, people that lack charisma, they are always focused on self. People that have charisma are focused on others. Does that make sense? Yes, sir. So when we talk about leaders and charisma and that whole deal, here's what I want you to understand about charisma. Let me share with you what it will do for you. Let me share with you what it won't do for you. Look at your notes. Charisma will get you inside the door. In other words, if you're charismatic, people will say, come on in, because they like you. Isn't that true? So charisma will get you inside the door, but credibility will keep you there. The character and the credibility that you have is more important in your leadership than the charisma. The charisma is kind of like the upfront stuff, the icing on the cake. But character is the inner stuff. And so when people say, well, all leaders are charismatic in personality, it's not true. It's not true at all. In fact, if you could only choose one of the two, choose character in your life. That's more important than charisma. Now, let me just stop here for a moment. Let me just also say, it would also help many of you who already have good character to try to work on charisma. I mean, don't you know just some wonderful people that are very boring, huh? I've often said when we get to heaven, God's not going to say, well done, thou good and boring servant. You've bored a few on earth, come up here and bore more, huh? So you want to also work on charisma, but that doesn't make you a leader. Let me give you myth number 5. Leaders control by manipulation. I've seen that happen many times. I've seen leaders who do manipulate, but that isn't what leadership is all about. In fact, it's always wrong. It's always wrong to manipulate people, and one of the saddest things I know is when leaders are in leadership positions and they use people. It's very sad. Let me give you the difference between manipulation and motivation, because sometimes we get them confused. Manipulation is moving people for the leader's advantage. In other words, if I'm a leader, I manipulate you when I move you where it really advantages just me. That's manipulation. Motivation is moving people for everyone's advantage. And that's always healthy. Because what do leaders do? Leaders move people. Leaders lead. Nothing wrong with moving people. Nothing wrong with motivating them. It's always wrong to manipulate them. So let me just share with you, since leaders lead, 3 things that I want for you to understand about the making of a leader. Number 1, understand the value of leadership. Understand that there's great value in learning to lead. Everything rises and falls on leadership. In my book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, I talk about the law of the lid. And basically, the law of the lid says that your leadership will determine your success. And if this hand is my leadership and this hand is my business, what that means is, if this is how well John Maxwell leads, all it means very simply is that my business, my organization, can never rise up any higher than the level of my leadership. So when people say, well, my company's not growing, my department's not growing, my business isn't growing, the organization that I lead hasn't been growing, what's the problem? It's never a problem with the organization, the business, department, or company. It's always a leadership issue. How do you grow an organization? Either grow the leader. I used to say either train them or trade them. Because leadership is the lid on an organization. And it always keeps the organization from growing. Now here's the good news. If this is my leadership ability, then my organization's always going to come under it and never go beyond it. But the good news is I can grow as a leader. And here's the value of learning leadership. So as I grow as a leader and I go up a notch or another notch and I keep on growing, what happens to my organization? Now my organization has room to grow, doesn't it? So I can just continue to go right up to where the level of my leadership is. So understand the value of leadership. Secondly, make a commitment to learn how to lead. Make a commitment to learn how to lead, and it really does take a commitment. Look at the quote in your notes on Earl Nightingale. If you spend 1 hour a day for 5 years on any given subject, you will become an expert in the field. Let me just share with you some of the cost, because what happens is growth stops in your life and my life when the price gets too high. That's the way it always works. So let me share with you some of the cost. For example, number 1, it'll cost you what I call personal change. If you're going to become a leader, there are things that you're going to have to change in your own personal life. There are going to have to be some things that you add that you don't do now. There are going to have to be some things that you take away that you do now. Isn't that true? And none of us like change. And so, therefore, many people never grow as a leader because they don't want to make the changes necessary. Another cost is time. It's going to take time. As I shared with you a moment ago, there's a process involved here. Number 3 is dollars. It's going to cost you money to change. And the only reason it's going to cost you money to change is because you've got to become a student of change. You've got to read some books. You've got to listen to some tapes. You've got to go to some leadership events. You've got to get exposed to where leaders are. Number 4, now this is a huge cost for a lot of people. Sometimes it costs you friendships. Sometimes it's a friendship relationship issue. Have you ever taken a journey and you started climbing in your journey, and you found out that the person that was maybe a very close friend didn't want to take the journey with you? In other words, they kind of wanted to settle for something a little bit less than what you wanted to settle for, and felt the pull as you're still trying to grow, as you're still trying to develop, and they're stopping right here, and feel the pull of going upward and growing and developing yourself, but the pull of stopping and going backward, because your friend didn't want to grow. Sometimes that's what causes leaders to have a tinge or a sense of loneliness. Because sometimes in their growing and development, there are relationships and friendships that are never going to quite be the same, because they're going to continue the journey where the person that they would love for them to take the journey with them is going to stop in the journey. Does that make sense? Now, we've heard the expression. I don't even think it's a leadership expression, but we've heard the expression before, it's lonely at the top. And I think that expression comes probably out of what I'm teaching right now, a sense of pulling away from maybe a lot of people that you really want to kind of go with you on this trip and that journey. And I heard one time a guy say, it's lonely at the top, so you better know why you're up there. Yeah, sometimes friendships and relationships, there's a cost factor there. And number 5, this will seem a little strange to you, but if you really become a leader, it will cost you your options and your freedom. Now you're thinking, oh, no, John, that's the reason I want to be a leader. I want to have options. I want to have more freedom. I want to be able to do what I want to do. Can I tell you something? When you become a leader, you don't get to do what you want to do anymore. You get to do what is best for the people. And all of a sudden, you no longer live what I call the selfish agenda. You no longer get to do what you want to do, but you're constantly saying, what is best for the people? And many times you have to put yourself way back on your agenda list so that you can help lead the people according to what their needs are. There's one more thing about this leadership thing, and then I'm ready to take you to another look at a leader. And that is that, number 3, you need to start leading. You just need to start leading. People all the time, they say, well, John, how can I learn how to be a better leader? And it's very simple. You never learn to lead just by learning. You learn to lead by doing. In other words, you've got to practice. You've got to practice leading. You've got to get a group of people and practice leading. And sometimes that gets a little tough. And there are 4 levels that'll help you understand this maybe a little bit better. Number 1 is leadership that interests people. And that's the person who says, I know where I'm going. There's something interesting about a person who knows where they're going. I mean, you just kind of look at them and say, they've got a goal. They maybe have a purpose in life. So that's the interest level. Secondly, there's leadership that impresses people. And that's the leader who looks at you and he says, you know what, I not only know where I'm going, but I've been there. And we say, oh, you've been there. Tell us about, you've been to the top of the mountain. Tell us about it a little bit. Okay, there's a little bit more of an impression there. The third level of leadership is leadership that influences people. And this person that influences others, they not only have been there, but they've taken you with them. And so you're coming back and saying, man, I'm telling you, we have taken an incredible journey together. But the level that I want to teach and help you to learn to lead is on level number 4, and that's the level that impacts people. Because really what I'm wanting to see is not only you to learn how to take people to the mountain. My goal is for you not only to be able to go out and find people and influence people and take them to the top with you, but you know that you have become an excellent leader when you've taught people to go find people and lead them. In other words, we want to encourage you, we want to teach you how to multiply yourself. Because if I'm the only one doing the leading in the organization, in this auditorium, if I'm the only one leading, it's going to take me a lot of time to come down and get one of you, and then take you back to the top, and then come back down and get one of you, and take you back to the top. It's not going to work that way. It's kind of like the guy in the circus that you've seen him before with the plates on the end of the stick. Have you ever seen this where he gets the plates and he starts spinning? What he does, he moves that stick and he gets those plates spinning. And he gets that plate spinning real fast. He puts it in the hole and he gets to the next one and he gets that plate spinning. He puts it in the hole and he does that one and he goes all the way down and he gets clear down the other end. Now he's got 10 plates spinning. It's wonderful. But by the time he gets down here, the plate on the far end is just about to fall off, and he goes back over there, and he gets that one going, and that one going, and that one going. He just moves back and forth, and after a while you say, that could wear you out. And a lot of leaders, their tongue is dragging. Why? Very simple. Because they've never taught anyone else to spin the plates. And the only thing that gets done is what they touch and what they lead. But when I think of a leader, what do leaders do? They lead. The letter E in the word leader, though, gives me another picture of a leader. Because when I think of a leader, I think of the word equipper. Leaders equip and train people. And one of my favorite equipping quotes is the one by Harvey Firestone, who said, "It is only as we develop others that we permanently succeed." So let me give you the game plan if you want to be a leader that equips people. Number one, develop self. The first person that you learn to work with is not someone else, but you learn to work with yourself. Does that make sense? So you begin to grow and develop yourself. Number two, lead self. You not only develop yourself, but you got to learn to lead yourself. And let me just flat out stop here for a moment and think of it this way. If you wouldn't follow yourself, why should anyone else? And yet I know all kind of people who have never developed themselves, never led themselves, but you know what they want to do? They want to lead everybody else. So you develop yourself, you lead yourself, then thirdly, you develop others. Now you have the right, because you have disciplined and developed yourself, to develop others. And number four, you lead others. But that's not the end of how an equipper thinks. Number five, you lead others to develop others. And number six, you lead others to lead others. That's when leadership begins to be effective. That's when leadership begins to multiply. When you begin to lead others to lead others. Now, when I start talking about the fact that leaders lead and leaders equip people, what I want you to understand about this is that equipping people is not easy. If it was easy, more people would do it, okay? So first of all, understand, this is difficult. But I love the story about, in fact, it was a friend of mine who I went to college with, and his name was Stuart. And he studied for the ministry, and he was a pastor for a while, and then he quit the ministry, and he became a funeral director. And I said, "Stuart, why did you kind of leave the ministry and become a funeral director?" He said, "Well, John," he said, "ministry's hard work." Well, I said, "I know it's hard work." He said, "For example, when I was a pastor, Joe had an alcohol problem, and I worked with him and counseled him in the whole process." And he said, "Joe still has an alcohol problem." And then there was Harry and Sue. They had a marriage problem, and I counseled with them for a year and a half. They still got divorced. He said, "John, the thing I like about my new job is when I straighten them out now, they stay straight." Now, there's this mindset that as a leader, we'll just get in there and we'll put these people in place, and we just go, "Okay, you're a leader, all right, and then you're a leader, you stay there, right there, and you're a leader, and we go and we think that, okay, now stay in place." But people don't work that way, do they? They move away. They change thoughts and ideas. They change jobs, they change organizations. And when you get to equipping people, it's never a static position. In fact, I was known as an equipping leader, and many times as I travel around the country, people say, "Well, do you have everybody in your organization equipped?" No. You never get everybody equipped. It is a never-ending process. But that's the game plan. Now, let me give you just 5 quick thoughts that will help you when you are wanting to equip people. Let's take the word equip for a moment. The letter E stands for evaluate. Evaluate the people that you have around you. And you ask yourself the question that's on the right-hand side of your notes. How well can they do? And from a 1 to a 10. In other words, if I look at you and I'm getting ready to train you, I got to ask, okay, what's your potential? And this is kind of a guess in the beginning, perhaps, but I'll put a number on you. I think they're potentially a 7, whatever, okay. The letter Q in the word equip. You have to qualify them. You have to then put them in the job. And you got to look at them and you got to ask yourself very simply, how well did they do? Now, this is a lot easier. This is a lot easier to identify than the first one, and that is how well can they do. That's a little bit intangible. But after they do the job, you look back and say, okay, how well did they do? The letter U stands for unite with them. You not only evaluate them and qualify them, but then you unite with them and you say, okay, how well are we doing together? In other words, are we creating synergy? Are we multiplying ourselves? And then the letter I in the word equip, you've got to invest time with them. In other words, the time that I'm spending with the person that I'm equipping and training, is it profitable? Is this a good profitable time? And then the letter P, you've got to provide resources and experiences for them. Resources and experiences. Absolutely essential. Let's go to the letter A. Because when I think of a leader, I think of the word attitude. That is so huge. Because your attitude will determine your altitude. And if you look on the next page, I have a marvelous, marvelous thought by Charles Swindoll, a good friend of mine. And then at the bottom of the page, and I'm not going to read them right now. You can do this on your own. I talk to you about what is an attitude from my book, The Winning Attitude. And at the top of page 25, I talk about how our attitudes determine our capacity to lead others. And there are 20 questions of which I want you on your own to ask yourself. But if you'll allow me, I'm taking you now to the bottom of the page. Because the attitude that you have, or the attitude that I have, determines how we see 4 things. Are you ready? My attitude determines how I see myself. Because it is true. I cannot go any higher than my self-image. Always remember this. You can never rise higher than how you see yourself. What happens is if you have success above your self-image that is low will cause you to sabotage your success. You will literally pull down the thing that you are successful in to match your self-image. People do not become successful way beyond how they see themselves. So my attitude to myself is very important. My attitude determines how I see others. And notice this phrase, I cannot go any higher than my belief in people. Isn't that true? In fact, I love the quote that says, it's wonderful when the people believe in the leader, but it's even more wonderful when the leader believes in the people. My attitude, thirdly, determines how I see my business, because I cannot go any higher than my dream for my career. And number 4, my attitude determines how I see my failures, because I could not go any higher than my willingness to get back up. Isn't that true? In fact, let me just talk to you a little bit about failure and what it does to us, because failure has a huge influence on our life. In fact, I wrote a book on failure recently called Failing Forward. And basically the book teaches you how to fail successfully, okay? Okay. And let me just take a poll here today in this conference. How many of you have failed at least one time? Today. Huh? Sure. Okay. With me, failure is a spiritual gift, okay? Okay. See, the question is not, are you going to fail? The question is, how you're going to handle failure. That's why in your notes, I have the thesis of the book, Failing Forward. Here it is. The major difference, do you see it, between achieving people and average people? Is their perception of and response to failure. And that's an absolute fact in your life. How you see failure going in, how you respond to failure going out, is going to determine how you handle failure. Now let's just talk about it just for a moment. Now we all fail. I fail, you fail. See, what I have come to the conclusion is we need to have somebody write a book, which I did, or have a course on what I call Failure 101. I mean, when kids go to college, you know what? When kids go to college, the first course they ought to have is they ought to sit there and the prof ought to say, welcome to Failure 101 course. And we're going to teach you how to fail, because all of your life, you're going to fall down. The question is not, are you going to fail? The question is not, are you going to fall down? Isn't that true? The question is what you're going to do about it when you get, in fact, in the book, Failing Forward, one of the things I teach you 15 things of how to fail correctly, but one of the things I teach you is that when you fall down, when you're on the floor, while you're down there, you might as well pick something up. Hey, you don't get down there all the time. Clean the floor while you're down there, huh? See, what happens is when we fail, what do? As soon as we're down on the floor, what do? We try to get up as fast as we can. We get up real quick, We get up off the floor and we, button our belt and everything. Well, hope nobody noticed me. And the whole, everybody in the room says, boy, did you see Maxwell fall flat on his face right there? You see, our embarrassment of the failure cause us to get up too quickly, and we never learn what we're supposed to learn. And you know what life does, don't you? Life just comes along and knocks us back down. In fact, life will knock you down until you learn. And so many of us have never learned how to handle failure. Now, here's what I'm saying to you. When I look at leaders, they have an attitude tenacity that allows them to keep getting up, because leaders get knocked down a lot. In fact, I had one friend who said, I'm never down. I said, what do you mean you're never down? He said, I'm either up or getting up. And that's what I'm talking about. This ability to have this attitude tenacity that will allow you to just keep getting up. And that's why I love so much the paradoxical commandments of leadership. Because this deals with our attitude better than anything else. This just kind of helps us understand that if we're going to lead, we're going to have this attitude tenacity. Look at it with me, would you? Look at these commandments of leadership. People are illogical, unreasonable, and self-centered. Love them anyway. If you do good, people will accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Do good anyway. If you're successful, you will win false friends and true enemies. Succeed anyway. The good you do today will be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Honesty and frankness make you vulnerable. Be honest and frank anyway. The biggest men with the biggest ideas can be shot down by the smallest men with the smallest minds. Think big anyway. People favor underdogs but follow only top dogs. Fight for the few underdogs anyway. What you spend years building may be destroyed overnight. Build anyway. People really need help, but many attack you if you do help them. Help them anyway. Give the world the best you have and you'll get kicked in the teeth. Give the world the best you have anyway. Does that make sense? And only a good attitude lets the leader get back up on top.